Look closely at the San Francisco Bay. The city skyline sets right on the edge of the water. You can almost see the cars moving, the buildings glowing as people live their everyday lives. 2 kilometers across that water sits a cold, rocky island, a massive fortress built to hold the most dangerous criminals in the United States. Escape was considered impossible. The location was intentionally cruel. Inmates trapped inside the cell blocks could hear the sounds of the city drifting across the bay. Freedom was visible, audible, and entirely out of reach. The island weaponized this proximity, turning the sight of ordinary life into a daily psychological taunt. Fences are secondary. Here nature provided the real security. The surrounding Pacific water temperatures stayed consistently between 10 and 14 degrees Celsius. Powerful, shifting tidal currents swept through the bay, constantly colliding with the jagged shoreline. Federal authorities sent a specific type of inmate into these conditions. Repeat escapees, kidnappers, and powerful syndicate bosses who ran empires on the mainland found themselves stripped of all leverage. Al Capone arrived with immense wealth and confidence. Outside, he bribed politicians and ordered executions inside Alcatraz. He could not even secure an extra blanket. The psychological crushing began the moment a prisoner stepped off the boat. Heavy shackles chained their movements while armed guards watched from elevated towers. A transfer here meant the absolute end of the line. Long before a man reached his cell, the overwhelming physical environment and the total loss of autonomy made it clear that he was entirely powerless. The harsh winds of the bay disappeared once the thick steel doors closed. Inside the main blocks, the environment was defined by an oppressive, echoing silence. Inmates spent their lives confined to a space exactly 5 feet by 9 feet, issued only a bed, sink, toilet, and small shelf. The prison operated on a system of absolute deprivation. Every basic human activity, from a work assignment to an hour of recreation, had to be earned through strict obedience to the daily routine. Endless rows of identical steel bars stretched down the tiers. Armed guards continuously patrolled. High metal walkways ensuring relentless surveillance over every movement. The monotony was weaponized. The endless repetition of counting, walking, and sitting quietly in a small box slowly ground away an inmate's sense of self. But the general population was mild compared to D-Block. Within the prison walls, this isolation area was known simply as the Hole. Men who broke the rules were sent here. They were locked in near total darkness and fed starvation-level diets. 4 days or weeks at a time, they had absolutely zero human contact. Prolonged sensory deprivation carries proving neurological impacts. Without external stimuli to process, the brain begins to misfire, triggering extreme anxiety, deep depression, and vivid visual and auditory hallucinations. The Hole operated as a psychological kill floor. It pushed men to the absolute brink of madness. Faced with a lifetime of slow psychological decay, a few inmates chose a desperate alternative. In 1962, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers initiated a high-risk escape attempt. They spent months slowly scraping away the concrete around the ventilation grates at the back of their cells, using stolen spoons and crude handmade tools to buy time during the nighttime bed checks. They constructed highly realistic dummy heads out of soap, toilet paper, and actual human hair gathered from the prison barbershop. Under the cover of darkness, they climbed up. The narrow utility corridors behind the cells broke through to the roof and slipped into the icy bay using a makeshift raft built from stolen raincoats. The FBI concluded the men likely drowned and their bodies were never found. Surviving the water may have been impossible, but their attempt proves that the human mind will eventually take any risk to escape total confinement. Despite its fearsome reputation, Alcatraz was not defeated by human rights campaigns. It was destroyed by simple logistics and salt. Transporting fresh water, fuel, and food by boat drove operating costs drastically high, while the relentless ocean mist corroded the concrete and steel. In 1963, the power was cut, the inmates were shipped out, and the facility was left to rot. The silence broke in 1969 when Native American activists occupied the abandoned island, using the decaying infrastructure to demand national attention for indigenous rights. Eventually, they chilly departed. Nature and time resumed their slow work, gradually reclaiming the physical structures and leaving the psychological scars behind. As the walls crumbled, the stories began. Former guards and new visitors reported hearing massive iron cell doors slamming shut. They described heavy footsteps in the empty corridors and distant screams echoing out of D Block. Psychologists point to a natural explanation when visitors enter an environment famous for human suffering. Their expectations collide with dark, narrow architecture and wind howling through iron bars. The brain easily interprets these environmental cues as genuine terror. Today, ferries bring millions of tourists to the dock. People line up and pay for the chance to stand inside the exact cells that drove men to the brink of insanity. Whether the island is genuinely haunted or just permanently stained by decades of concentrated despair, the effect is exactly the same. Alcatraz remains the ultimate psychological trap, holding our imaginations hostage long after the cell doors stop closing.